Rahma Zein, who is joining from her car, I think. Is that right? Okay. So this is going to be a little shaky, but she really wanted to join and make some comments and talk to us because she's usually in Egypt, but she's stateside now. So here we are. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Katie. Yes, I'm sorry. It is quite impromptu, but I'm glad to join in, even in a car.
You were recently on Piers Morgan, and I believe you wanted to talk about that exchange that you had with him, and also the son of one of the heads of Hamas. Is that how he's introduced?
Yes, that is how he's introduced. So what I was going to say was, it was very interesting that the show had been calling me to go on for a long time, like a lot of times, and I'd always say no because I thought, there's absolutely no point to it. And I did agree to go on the show, and I was quite surprised that 6 months later we are having the same questions being addressed to us, and we're having to repeat ourselves.
Tens of thousands of people have died in Gaza, and it's quite likely, if there is a full-scale invasion of Rafah, that tens of thousands of more civilians may die in the process of Israel, as they put it, getting rid of Hamas in its entirety. What is your view of where this war now is?
It's sad to see that a few months after, we're regurgitating and having to repeat the same things that we've warned about since day one, that things are getting out of hand, that at one point do you start calling someone who keeps inciting these war crimes a criminal. So not having held them accountable from day one has led to the audacity and the confidence that we are witnessing in the crimes. And just as you had stated, now that there might be further violence onto Rafah, you don't know if the US is even able to stop them.
And I think it dawned on me then and there, and how scary it was, that it wasn't that you're debating, it wasn't that you're giving facts of the matter as to what's happening, is that you are convincing the other party that Arab life is as worthy. And that is the scariest thing, when it dawns on you that these debates are absolutely null and void. It is very scary when it dawns on you that these conversations are not debates where you're bringing in facts or you're discussing the fact of the matter or the continued onslaught. The fact that 5 or 6 months later, I am being asked the same questions, and the 40,000 Palestinians killed is being ignored is extremely scary, because you realize that you're not dealing with people who don't know what's happening. You're dealing people that know exactly what's happening, but simply think that you are lesser than. So how can I start this conversation if you are looking at me and think that my life is worth less than a person of the West? And that is what is scary. And this is why these student movements are extremely important now. They're extremely important. And though they're trying to discredit them, it's not working, because there's only so much you can do to hide the sun.
We have seen many of these university protests, people openly talking about intifada, openly chanting from the river to the sea, others brazenly supporting Hamas. Can you understand why Jewish students at these campuses feel so threatened by this?
Really? Because when I was there, they were predominantly Jewish students who were protesting. There were predominantly Jewish students that were protesting. Even in the UCLA one, I don't know if I'm able to say his name, but one very prominent Jewish scholar was side by side with me in the protest in order to, because at the end of the day, we felt bad for these students because they're the ones facing police brutality. As Mr. Hassan said, they're the ones facing infiltrators who are attempting to discredit them. It was bizarre to see one student pose as a pro-Palestinian protester and then write inciting chants on the ground and quickly the pro-Palestinian students rushed to scrub it off.
I see people from all walks of life united on the same road, saying we will not allow history to repeat itself. We will not wait for you to celebrate us once you've erased us. They are calling you terrorists. They are calling you radicals because they want to discredit you so they can own you. Will they own you? Will they discredit you? Will they dehumanize you?
He wrote a piece, Piers Morgan, today about how, I think for the New York Post, about how are parents letting their kids be hateful and say anti-Jewish things. His lane is that, and he loves asking people to condemn Hamas. That's one of his favorites.
And then there was another point when discussing the students that are there. First of all, this is important to note, Katie. If you look at everyone who's gone on the show that is speaking for Palestine, you're going to notice that there are people from all walks of life saying different things, but going to the same goal of freedom. When you look at the people who are speaking up for Zionism and speaking against these students, they regurgitate almost a press release type of messaging. They keep reiterating the same thing about Hamas, trying to discredit the students, talking about infiltration from Islamists. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. And you've been to some of these protests, right?
I've been to these protests. You have people from all walks of life. It was very bizarre for them to tell me, how do the Jewish students feel when right next to me were Jewish students, and they're one of the most vocal about what's going on. You have Muslim students, you have Christian students. It's not about the religion, and absolutely ridiculous for them to try and sway the narrative towards that. Think about it. Guys, I'm shocked. Think about it. At the end of the day, how are you defending people stuck under rubble, being killed by thousands? How are you defending children being abducted from their homes? Every day is a new atrocity. Every day is a war crime. It's insane. There's no point in debating anymore. And this is why this student movement is imperative. Everybody speaking up is imperative, because it dawns on you that you're not trying to debate the other person. You're trying to convince them that my life is worth it, that you shouldn't rob me, that you shouldn't murder me.
Question about how should Israel have responded to that terror attack? It's a straightforward question.
Because
what should they have done?
Your question, by ending the siege, by ending apartheid, by realizing that this is not a sustainable solution to keep oppressing a people. I'll tell you something interesting. There is blatant attacks, like I blatantly kill you. But there is something that we don't realize that hurts sometimes even more, the intangible, the disrespect, the checkpoints. One day at one of these checkpoints, and the amount of disrespect these people have to go through, the fact that at one point in the West Bank, a settler can just walk into your home, waltz into your home, destroy your home, take it, and be backed by a soldier. The utter disrespect of having so much injustice. There was this one Palestinian who said, our heart breaks every day over 100 times. What on earth? How is this sustainable?
Do you have a discussion after that? If the infrastructure of it is racist, if the infrastructure of it is supremacist, if the infrastructure of it is that you are thinking that I am lesser than. And it's true. And this is why we see these token colored politicians, whether Arab or African American, they're the scariest. And the only reason they're allowed on the table is because they're on script. But notice when they go off script, they're no longer invited. They're no longer the decision makers. You are allowed in as a colored person as long as you speak like us. That is it. Otherwise, you are shunned, you are discredited, you are called barbaric, you are made to seem a terrorist. You had all kinds of names being thrown at these protesters. Protesters who are saying genocide is wrong. Can you fathom that? When you actually think about it, you realize how farcical it all is. How dare you? At one point, you realize that these students are not scared of being suspended, of being expelled. They are more scared to live in a world that is okay with a televised genocide.
Right.
I am more scared to live in a world where war criminals are recording videos of them toying with Palestinian women's lingerie, of dead and displaced women's lingerie, than live in a world where I'm going to get expelled, where I'm going to be kicked out of the system. What kind of world is it? So, if anything, these students are the smartest ones on there, because there's this void of leadership and they've realized that they need to step in. They've been waiting for the adult in the room and no one showed up. So they're the ones that are showing up. They keep waiting for someone to speak up and it's not happening. So of course they're going to fill in that void. Of course they're going to speak up, because there's only so much you can sustain when you are watching day to day different atrocities, be it the aid, be it what happened to UNRWA. Every day is something. How can you sustain this? And what are you expecting the world to look like afterwards? After this. And now there is an invasion of Rafah, and we're sitting here debating what is right and what is wrong. And Hamas, this is bigger, this is older than Hamas, this is bigger, this is older than any political entity, this is a plight, this is the result of years of oppression. And I said this also on the show. They talk about, and especially in our culture, sometimes it's not even the blatant killing and theft, it's the disrespect. Watching your father get disrespected at the checkpoint, watching your colleague suddenly get dragged away from his home, watching as a soldier helps a settler come into your home and takes everything that you own and that you've worked with, and for the world to stand up and say, well, you ought to be quiet about it. How else are you going to resist this if every single international entity is being used to actually weaponize and enable these atrocities? Who's to stand up for me? And this is what's happening with the students is a microcosm of that. Who's standing up for what's happening? Who's standing up for the oppressed? The world is broken.